Are you trying to establish your brand as a thought leader? Start a podcast, invite industry experts to be guests on your show, and watch your brand become the prime resource for decision makers in your industry. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to B2B Growth. I am your host for today's episode, Nikki Ivy with Sweetfish Media. I've got with me today Jessica Rhodes, who is founder and co-owner at Interview Connections. Jessica, how are you doing today?
Hey, Nikki, thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah. I'm really excited to dig into this topic. Obviously, it's a topic that's pretty close to my heart. We're going to be talking about podcasts today and sort of how what you do, I would say, enhances the value of those for a lot of different folk. But before we get into that, I would love to just hear a little bit of background on you and what the folks at Interview Connections have been up to these days.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, I'm the founder of Interview Connections. We're the first and leading podcast booking agency. I started the business in 2013. And really what we do is we connect entrepreneurs together for podcast interviews. So we get people booked on other shows as a guest. And we also have services for podcast hosts who need guests booked on their show.
I see. So how did you, I'm just going to jump right in because I need to know, how did you come up with this idea to start a podcast booking company when, there weren't any other businesses like that at the time?
Yeah. So I started my business actually when I was pregnant with my first child because my primary goal was to be at home and have a home-based business. And my dad, being a business coach and an online entrepreneur, he already had a podcast and he was getting interviewed on like internet radio shows and podcasts and teleseminars because this was like back in 2012, 2013. Mm-hmm. And he goes, "Why don't you get me booked on some shows?" So I just started doing that as his virtual assistant. And as I was connecting him with shows and guests for interviews, I took on a couple other clients. And really, timing is everything because I look back on those days and the stats show us, the data shows that podcast listenership has continually increased every single year since 2013. So I really got in at the start of a huge growth period in the podcasting industry. So really, the simple answer is as I was booking interviews for just a couple of clients, really as a freelancer, I was just hearing so much interest and saw that there was nobody else in the marketplace offering podcast booking. Mm-hmm. So I started Interview Connections and really created a business around it as opposed to just doing it as a freelancer.
Yeah. I mean, so you mentioned that there was a lot in there. Yeah. First of all, yay and congrats that you had a baby and were like working and doing that kind of stuff. I'm all about it. But you said your dad was a career coach and an online entrepreneur himself. What types, so he obviously fits the profile for folks that could benefit from this, but what types of entrepreneurs should be leveraging podcast interviews?
Yeah. So we work with multi-6 and 7-figure business owners and entrepreneurs who use this strategy, podcasting and getting interviewed on podcasts, to build their brand, get brand exposure, get backlinks on other websites. So it's really, really good for search engine optimization. I mean, people pay a lot of money just to build their SEO, and this is a really good way to get backlinks to your website and also to generate leads and clients. So the types of business owners that will benefit most from podcasting are those that can work with people virtually. So people find you all over the world, all over the country. And if you can work with people virtually, that's key. And also people whose average client has a pretty high lifetime value, because once you convert that one client, that podcast interview has a huge return on investment.
Nice. Yeah, no, again, you're preaching to the choir. This makes it, she knows what she's talking about. Listen to this woman. So another way that you and I kind of talked offline about how folks are leveraging podcasts is to support the launch of a book they've written or some other campaign. How should one time a podcast tour to support that kind of a launch?
Yeah, this is such an important question because all the time I talk to people who are like, my book is coming out next month and I need to get on a whole bunch of podcasts to support the launch. And you really need to plan ahead. I would say you need to start your podcast tour at least 6 months before your book, your program, your course launches. And the reason is podcasters, a lot of podcasters will batch produce, they will pre-record their episodes months before they actually release it on iTunes and Stitcher and all the other places. Also, life gets in the way. I mean, I do podcast interviews all the time and they get rescheduled, they get moved. Somebody, has a baby or somebody died and like they get rescheduled. So you really need to plan ahead. If you want to have a little bit of control over when the episode gets released, you need to be getting interviewed months and months before the actual launch. So you do have that flexibility to say, hey, when are you going to release this episode? Would it be possible to release it this week? And if you're making that request a week before the book launch, you're not going to like the answer because the podcaster has to put it through post-production. They need to get it edited. They need to have show notes written. There's this whole process that they go to after they record. So you just need to give the host some time if you want to make that request.
That's such good advice. Yeah. I mean, the 6 months is a long time, but like you said, in behind the scenes, putting together a podcast world, it's really not when you think about, how long in advance a lot of the time that we do actually record these. So that's a cool little nugget for folks out there. Speaking of nuggets, what other types of things can our listeners, what other kind of ways can our listeners be using podcast interviews to increase their revenue and generate more leads? I know you mentioned backlinks and SEOs. Talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so the SEO is a great one that a lot of people don't think too much about, but one strategy that we really use with our clients is when we're looking for shows to book them as a guest on, we take a look at their domain authority. We use a tool called Moz, M-O-Z, and you put that plugin on Chrome and you can see what a website's domain authority is. And so the higher the domain authority, the more valuable it is to have a link to your website on that website. And so when we're looking for podcasts, we check out their domain authority. And if it's pretty high, if the podcast is relevant, speaking to the right target audience, that's going to be a really, really valuable placement. That's going to be a great interview appearance for that guest. So that's one thing that you can look at. And then I always say, when you're getting interviewed, when the show goes live, go check out the show notes page because there was one time where I went and looked and there was like a typo in the link to my website. So I said, hey, can you just fix that? Because the backlink doesn't work if there's a typo. So the SEO value is huge. And so you just want to make sure you're getting on shows with a decent domain authority and you're making sure that they are adding a link to your website in the show notes page.
Well, I hadn't thought about that. I didn't know. You said the Moz Chrome extension.
Yeah, it's M-O-Z. I think there are several tools that can help you know a domain authority, but that's the one our client told us about last year, and it's been really great to check out. It's kind of fun to see what everyone's rating is.
Yeah. I'm curious about a lot of sites right now. The wheels are turning, Jessica. And so I have one more quick question before I pick your brain about what you're putting into your brain. We talked a little bit about the importance of in-house employees in a high touch agency model. Why do you say that that's so important?
Yeah. So for the first several years of Interview Connections, I had contractors because that's just like, you're like, I need a VA. And that's the easiest thing to do is to find a freelancer that you don't have to do like payroll and benefits and all that stuff. But as we grew, we saw that we really couldn't control the quality of the service in our agency with a team of contractors. So we really believe that a high touch agency really requires in-house employees. And that's why we have in-house employees full-time with benefits. It gives our clients that extra added level of quality because they can reach them on the phone, over email. They've got the same person booking them long term. It's not like this is your contractor today and somebody else comes in tomorrow. So I think that's really important is as the podcasting industry is growing, you really do need that stability and quality of care, quality of service when you're getting booked on podcasts, because people are really looking at podcasting as a very serious media exposure opportunity. So you really want to be careful about who you're having represent you.
For sure. No, again, that really speaks to my experience. We're a 100% remote team at Sweetfish Media. And so to be able to do something like this and have the team remote, I imagine if we were all contractors, it'd be, even more of a task. But yes, making sure that there is some standardization of the quality and the personnel across the board that are going to be interacting with people. Yeah, I could see how that's super important. So you taught us a lot today, Jessica.
Thank you for the opportunity.
And now I'm interested in what is teaching you. What are you engaging with, right? What are you reading that's really sort of or listening to that's speaking to you these days?
So this is a great question because it kind of dovetails from our last conversation or, the last question. So I just finished reading the book Bigger Than You, The Entrepreneur's Guide to Building an Unstoppable Team. It's by Kelly Roach. We are in Allie Brown's Premier Group with Kelly, and my business partner and I did a VIP day with her after reading this book, and it's absolutely brilliant. It really walks you through how to build, as she says, an unstoppable team. And honestly, we are transforming our business based on what we've learned in this book. So I cannot recommend it enough.
Nice. That's one I haven't heard yet. And I'm excited to check that one out.
And I've even sent it to our manager to read. Like, that's how good it is. So if you've got leaders in your organization, send it to them because it's going through onboarding and hiring and training, which is just so important.
Right. And who doesn't want an unstoppable team, right? So, I know that, like I said, you've taught us a lot today. All this stuff is super valuable, and it is podcasting, a medium that people are taking more and more serious by the day. So I'm sure folks are going to want to learn more from you and follow along with what you're doing. How can folks connect with you, Jessica?
Yeah. So my website is interviewconnections.com. That is where you can find a bunch of information about our business, and you can check out our podcast. I'm also on LinkedIn if you want to direct message with me directly.
Sweet. I'm going to go out and do that right after we get off this call.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jessica. This has been great. Have a good one.
Thanks. Bye.
We totally get it. We publish a ton of content on this podcast, and it can be a lot to keep up with. That's why we've started the B2B Growth Big Three, a no-fluff email that boils down our 3 biggest takeaways from an entire week of episodes. Sign up today at sweetfishmedia.com/big3. That's sweetfishmedia.com/big3.